Hi, my name is Kim, and these are the supplies you're going to need to paint this really cute painting. So you need a paintbrush and a pencil, a cup of water. You're going to need a water bottle, spray bottle. You're also going to need your watercolors. You're going to need your paper towel, and then we'll go ahead and open it up, and we're going to spray our watercolor with a little bit of water just to kind of freshen them up and get them ready to apply the pigment a little later. So we just spray it just a little bit. And then our first step that we're going to do is sketching our drawing out first. Just a quick sketch is good enough, and then we can start applying the paint. So the first color that we are going to be applying is going to be a light green. This is green with a little bit of yellow mixed into it. We are just getting kind of a first coat on. Typically when we paint in watercolors, we do it in layers, and we want to wait for our watercolor paints to dry. It just looks a little bit nicer that way. It makes it a little bit easier to add shadows and shading. So nice thin layer of this first coat of green. Next, we're going to move to the next cactus on the left, and this green, I want each of these plants to be a little bit of a different color. So I added a little bit more blue to the green that I already had existing. I originally started with green and a little bit of yellow, and then as I moved on to the next cactus over, I added a little bit more blue. But as you can see with this first coat, I am putting on a very nice light thin coat. I put all of the pigment on the lid of my watercolor, and then I just add like 2 or 3 scoops of water, just dip it really quick into the water and add it to my watercolor to make it nice and thin. Next, we're moving on to the pots. So I just so happen to have gray in my watercolor palette. Now I know not everybody has gray in their watercolor palette, so if you don't, it's not a big deal. You're just going to mix a black. So you're going to start off by mixing a little bit of blue, a little bit of brown if you have it, and that'll make a nice black. If you don't have brown, you can do blue, red, and a little bit of yellow. That will also make a black. If you're lucky enough to have a white, you can do blue, yellow, and some red, and a little bit of white, and you're going to have a beautiful gray. If you don't have any white, no big deal. Add a bunch of water to your watercolor, and it'll give the same effect. So as you can see, there's several different ways that you can accomplish a gray. It's really just about what supplies you have and how you can make it work for you. Once we've painted the gray in the pots, at least that first coat, we're going to go ahead and move to the second coat on our cactus. So we're starting to add some details. So what I did was I mixed a darker green. All I did to make this green darker than the green that I already had on the cactus that I applied the first time is just added a little bit of blue to it. It's just going to make it a little bit darker. I also added less water, so more pigment, a little less water, and I'm just kind of adding some details to this cactus. I'm just kind of working through those details and continuing to add a little bit more. I also want to put a little bit of shading behind the little arms of the cactuses that are kind of out and coming forward. So I just put a little bit of that darker color right behind it. That really helps those arms kind of separate themselves from that back cactus. Okay, so now we're starting on the next cactus over, kind of adding a couple details. I again went to a darker shade. I did this by just adding a little bit more blue to the original color that we put on this cactus. So just a little bit more blue was added to it, and a lot more pigment. So less water, more pigment. Okay, so now we're moving on to the last cactus to the left. And again, one more time, adding just more blue, less water, and more pigment to the shape of this cactus. And really, I'm just focusing on the shadows now. I don't really want to put a lot of dark color into the highlights. I just want to leave them that nice, beautiful green that I already have there. I think that's perfect. And I'll just kind of keep on darkening my values with this darker bluey kind of green that I've created. Okay, next we want to work on the inside of those pots. So I went ahead and made a black, or I just used one of the blacks that I have in my palette. Not every watercolor palette has black. So again, if you don't know how to make black, it is blue and brown. That's one easy way to make it if you have a brown. You don't have a brown, you're going to do a lot of blue pigment with a little bit of red, and then you're going to add a little bit of yellow, and that's going to make a nice black. You're going to want to water down this black because we want to do it in layers. So we're going to water down this black, add 2 or 3 scoops of water to your black paint, and then you're going to start adding that black in the pot itself, just to kind of make it look like it's dark in that pot, like there's soil in there. So get it nice and dark. Okay, so next I'm just adding some more detail to the pots again. I want to make the edges a little bit darker, just to kind of give it more of a round like a round shape. So making those edges darker is just going to start to create that round shape that I really want on these pots. So I just again mixed a gray and just added a second coat. Okay, now we want to go back into our cactus again and add another layer of shadows. So I'm really going to focus on the deeper shadows now. Again, I added a little bit more blue to my greens. It just really richens it up. I actually started to add a little bit of brown to my greens to really get deep into those shadows and make it a lot darker value than the rest of the cactus. I really wanted to make sure I focused on adding some shadow where the pot is creating a shadow on the cactus as well. So we want our cactus to be sitting in the pot, so we want to shadow the bottom of our cactus, just to make sure that that it looks like it's sitting in the pot, not kind of coming forward right to the edge of the pot. So just adding a little bit of shadow in there. Okay, so now I think I've shadowed my cactus or cacti, whatever it's supposed to be, the way I like it, the way I feel makes me happy. So I'm going to start adding some of the cacti spines, so the little needles. The one in the center is the one that I was the most excited to do, so I just painted that one first. So I started out with a nice cream color. I know watercolor doesn't always have the best whites or cream colors to work with, but I got lucky with this particular brand that I'm using. I absolutely love it, and the whites coated good enough for me. So this wasn't actually a solid white. It was more of a white with some yellow and a touch of red in it. So if you have those colors, you can mix that color together as well. So that would be white, a little bit of yellow, and a little bit of red. So super small dot of red. The yellow pigment is typically a lot weaker than the other pigments in your paint. So when you're mixing this color, know that you're going to need a lot more of the yellow and a lot more of the white and just probably a drop of the red. And when you're mixing this color, just kind of keep in mind if it's a slightly different shade. Don't stress out too much. This is a creative step. If you wanted to make purple needles on your cactus, you could absolutely do that. And it would still look fantastic, especially if you loved it when you were painting it. So, you know, change up colors if you want. It doesn't have to look exactly like what I'm painting here. This is just an example or a guideline that you can kind of look at and change as you wish. Next, I am adding the little needles to this other cacti. So there are little teeny tiny needles on the end of these little bulbs that I was painting in the beginning of the painting. So I'm just adding little spines. So I'm just taking my paintbrush and flicking it out just around that little circle at the end with the same exact color that I used on the first cactus. So it's that white mixed with that yellow and a little bit of red to make a nice beautiful peach. And I'm just adding little spines by adding this color and flicking my paintbrush out in like a star shape on each one of these little darker spots. The next cactus, I added just a little bit more red into the mixture, into the peach. Actually, just starting off with the dots where I'm going to put the cactus needles later. But for now, I'm just kind of getting those dots positioned onto my cactus so that way I can add them a little bit later. So next I wanted to add a little bit of color by adding some cactus flowers to my cactus. I really like this pink that was in my palette. I thought they were perfect. To recreate this pink, you're just going to need some watercolor white and a little bit of red and maybe a tiny bit of orange. Now I'm going to add a nice lavender purple flower to my other cactus. To mix this type of purple that I already have in my palette, you're just going to use a white watercolor pigment and a little bit of red and a tiny bit of blue. And you should get this nice, beautiful lavender. Next, I'm going to continue to add more detail and deepening of my values. So I'm just going back in and adding a little bit more darkness to the shades that I've already kind of added in earlier, just kind of touching up where I think it needs to be darker and where I think I need to even some colors out. So really that's how I finish out this painting, is I just kind of continue to work with my values until I like them. So I'm just basically finishing up the last details of my painting. but I hope you enjoyed learning about how to do this cute little easy painting that anybody can do just with these simple steps that I have in this video. If you like watching these types of videos and learning how to paint, drop me a like button and subscribe to my channel. I am going to release one free class a month. And last but not least, don't forget to sign your beautiful masterpiece. And everybody have a beautiful rest of your day and happy painting.